This particular series is on the nervous system, and the second in the series is how to become a better student, a better teacher, how to learn faster, and how to get smarter. We're going to go through the factors that improve brain and learning. Going to go through cranial nerves 1. Cranial nerve 1 is the olfactory nerve, and cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve. Sleep, exercise, stress, or all other things that affect how well your memory learning affects affects being more efficient at learning. And also the second thing we're going to get into just at the very end is how you can make your brain smarter. So there is a scientific basis for the best way to learn, and I'm going to go through a couple of those studies. Just to review, using your 5 senses is the most efficient way to learn. And I'll go through this again, how extensive note-taking interferes with your ability to use all of these 5 senses to improve learning and efficiency. Now, just to recall, your mammalian brain does have seniority, and a mammalian brain is here shown in the red as your second part of your brain. So in terms of an evolutionary sense, your reptilian brain is down there at your brainstem, your heart beating, breathing, those are the oldest part of your brain. And the next part is the mammalian brain that's associated with the social, the emotional part of your brain, also producing hormones. And then, of course, the meaning new, the neocortex is the most recent part of your brain that's responsible for our creativity. So this is the image that I've set up, how your brain actually has segmented into, the way I think of it is 3 segments. And the part of learning that you need to embrace is that mammalian part of your brain. Basically, again, it receives all the sensory input. And it is specifically designed for memory and learning. All of your special senses goes directly into the middle part of your mammalian brain, to this structure called the thalamus. The special senses take the information and take it into the thalamus where it's processed, and then the thalamus sends it to areas of your brain to delegate how you're going to respond. Cranial nerve 1 is the olfactory nerve. That's depicted by the nose. I think of the cranial nerve 1, and the way to remember that is cranial nerve 1 is one single nose. The vision, or cranial nerve 2, you have 2 eyes. And all of these others also affect your sense of ability to memory. And this little structure here, it's a single little structure, and it's called the hippocampus. I drew a structure of a hippopotamus. Hippo is the water horse. So hippocampus is the structure that looks like a hippopotamus, not exactly, but somewhat. And it helps with your short-term memory. Factors that make it stick. The things that I've included are your special senses, particularly the nose, olfactory nerve 1, olfactory or cranial nerve 2, sleep, exercise, and just mild stressors. These are things that make information stick. Cranial nerve 2, cranial nerve 1, or your nose. It's great because it has the direct pathway to the brain. So right at the base of your brain is the olfactory bulb, sending those little neurons down to the top of your nose, picking up sense of smell, also taste. and taking it directly into the brain and into the thalamus. It is an interesting cranial nerve because if it's injured, it will do its best to repair rather than allow you to take other parts of your brain over for your sense of smell. So how does that relate with learning? They did a study with a couple groups of students. Actually, it was one researcher who put and sprayed the cologne brute on the wall of his lecture hall, and he was giving a lecture to two separate groups of students. One group listened to exactly the same lecture with the smell on the wall, and the other group there was no smell, and he did not tell them that there was a smell on the wall. And then both the groups were tested afterwards, and the group that learned or listened to the lecture with that sense of smell in the room had a significantly improved score on their exam. Now, on to Cranial Nerve 2. The best way to convey a message is it seeing the image of the snail or reading the word slow. And that has been studied as well. This is called the Pictorial Superiority effect. And it's using Cranial Nerve 2. Remember, 2 eyes, Cranial Nerve 2. The eye is the sense that beats all others for the efficiency of learning. So watching, listening, and smelling are great, but the eye, seeing the images are very efficient for remembering and learning. This is my granddaughter. Have you seen my bean? So you're born with this ability to see. Your cranial nerves, they take in the images, and then here they split at the optic chiasm and they reach the thalamus on either side of your brain. And then that takes it into the occipital lobe for vision. So you've studied for a history midterm. This is a scenario. Think about how much you're going to remember. Your midterm, you've read the textbook, you get a 95% on the exam. Your final exam is cumulative. It's going to be coming in a couple, 3 weeks. How much of that information are you going to remember? So you've learned the material for the midterm. How much are you going to remember? 10%, 60%, or is it going to be a whopping 100%? They did a research study on this as well, and they took 2 groups of students. The first group studied only words, and the second group studied words and images. And then they were all tested 72 hours later. And they found that the students who studied only words had only a retention of 10% of the information, versus those who studied words and images that were related to the words had a 60% retention of the information. And this is what's called the picture superiority effect. The reason is that words on a page are actually just symbols, and you have to read them, process them, and put them into your brain. And it's a multi-step process. So you're forming this image in your brain of the words you've read. Okay, so in answer to your question, you're going to remember 60% of the material if you supplement with images, only 10% if you read only words. But then again, you're going to feel a little bit of stress at the ones you've missed, right? So the questions you miss will give you just that little bit of stress, and you're more likely to remember the information of the questions you've missed. So this gets onto stress. And this is where just a little bit of stress is great for learning and great for your performance. They studied this early on with a little bit of shocks given to these mice that were running through mazes. And they found that just a little bit of stress, mild stress, improved the training, putting the mice through the maze. And how this relates to humans, they found that there's a curve, there's a sweet spot where you do best with just an optimal amount of stress. So too little stress, you're lackadaisical, you don't care, you're sleepy, but too much stress is shown by the student trying to take an exam under a lot of pressure. And this is also could be related to musicians. You'll notice if you talk to professional musicians, actors, actresses, they say their performance is much better if they're performing in front of an audience, to give them just that little bit of stress. So how does this relate to the classroom? Specifically for the teacher, you would want to be giving frequent small quizzes that are low stakes, so not a lot of stress. Kahoot's a great platform for that, where you can interject questions throughout the lectures. And then occasionally these larger tests that take that knowledge that they accumulate throughout the lectures. So let's get into the next thing about rest and sleep. You're studying for a big exam, it's late and tired. Should you keep pushing it, studying it, or should you sleep? Let's look on some of these sleep. These are very early studies of taking the rats, putting them through the mazes, and they monitored their brain waves. And by the way, this is my photoshopping. No, no animals were hurt in these studies. So the brain activity were monitored during their sleep. And what they found is during sleep, the rats will run the maze over and over again. They'll come up with the same brain waves that they had going through the mazes happening over and over again. And it's during this rapid eye movement of sleep. So for humans, this rapid eye movement shown here in the purple is happening all the time, all throughout the night. So if you get a shortened period of sleep, like less than 6 or 7 hours, you end up missing some of these learning stages where your memories are being solidified. Now, the other stage of sleep, there are 4 stages actually, but the REM sleep or the rapid eye movement sleep are where you solidify your memories. But your deep sleep is where you get rid of the metabolic waste. And that is only happening during deep sleep. This is only recent evidence showing that cleanup of your brain, cleanup of that metabolic waste happens during this very deep or non-REM sleep. And we'll get into that in future lectures, but basically it's only during this deep, deep sleep that the cerebral spinal fluid flows between the cells of the brain and clears out all that metabolic waste. So they did a research study. They took, again, 2 groups of students. They were taught all the same material in the morning. One group of students took a nap, and the second group stayed awake. And then they gave them an exam in the evening. And they found that the students who had a nap actually did significantly better on their exam, on their test for the information they were taught earlier in the day. The results are showing that sleep enhances learning. Also, taking a nap of like a 30-minute nap is most beneficial for solidifying memories or things you've learned earlier in the day. Okay, so let's go on to movement. The brain has been studied using these functional MRI scanners. So when the brain sits very quietly, after a while, the brain activity starts to lose a little bit of color. It's getting quieter. The brain, after a 20-minute walk, starts lighting up. So intermittent exercise, and that's about a break every hour or so, keeps the brain stimulated, and it allows for you to have more mental alertness and creativity. So learning and a better brain. Remember that you were not born with the ability to read and write. You used the five senses to survive. And of that, your mammalian brain is your best leader. It's taking all the input from the special senses into the thalamus. It's allowing you to make quick decisions based on prior experiences. And of course, it has all these great feel-good hormones that are released, encouraging you to repeat the behavior of eating, reproducing, all those feel-good hormones. Images convey information faster to the brain than reading words. So you learn better having images, having smells. For instance, if you were in a lecture hall, you could have a little bit of maybe some peppermints. Mild stressor helps just a little bit, either challenging yourself with Quizlet or small quizzes that you find online, making sure you get the right amount of sleep, not too much, not too little. 7 to 8 is about the sweet spot. And of course, getting up and moving often. So with all of that, it is really hard for people to say, I have been taking notes all my life. There's no way I can stop taking notes. So that's been studied. A set of researchers looked at students who took longhand versus typing. And they come up to the conclusion that taking longhand or taking with a pen, paper, is far superior than taking it on your computer and trying to type. When you type, you're trying to transcribe the lecture, and you end up only listening to the words and not listening to the meaning. So you become a transcriptionist. So those who, if you must take notes, whatever you do, make sure you take brief notes and take longhand. Plus, if you're watching the teacher carefully, you're able to pick up on these subtle cues of like the emphasis on certain words. What's going to be more important to the teacher is going to be what's coming up on the test. Okay, so the last thing is, how can we make a better, stronger, or smarter brain? And this is, I'm going to pull in the YouTube video of TED Talk. And notice when they present this that they use lots and lots of images.
Did you know that every time musicians pick up their instruments, there are fireworks going off all over their brain? On the outside, they may look calm and focused, reading the music and making the precise and practiced movements required. But inside their brains, there's a party going on. How do we know this? Well, in the last few decades, neuroscientists have made enormous breakthroughs in understanding how our brains work by monitoring them in real time. with instruments like fMRI and PET scanners. When people are hooked up to these machines, tasks such as reading or doing math problems each have corresponding areas of the brain where activity can be observed. But when researchers got the participants to listen to music, they saw fireworks. Multiple areas of their brains were lighting up at once as they processed the sound, took it apart to understand elements like melody and rhythm, and then put it all back together into unified musical experience. And our brains do all this work in the split second between when we first hear the music and when our foot starts to tap along. But when scientists turn from observing the brains of music listeners to those of musicians, the little backyard fireworks became a jubilee. It turns out that while listening to music engages the brain in some pretty interesting activities, playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full body workout. The neuroscientists saw multiple areas of the brain light up, simultaneously processing different information in intricate, interrelated, and astonishingly fast sequences. But what is it about making music that sets the brain alight? The research is still fairly new, but neuroscientists have a pretty good idea. Playing a musical instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as with any other workout, disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. The most obvious difference between listening to music and playing it is that the latter requires fine motor skills, which are controlled in both hemispheres of the brain. It also combines the linguistic and mathematical precision in which the left hemisphere is more involved, with the novel and creative content that the right excels in. For these reasons, playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. Because making music also involves crafting and understanding its emotional content and message, musicians often have higher levels of executive function, a category of interlinked tasks that includes planning, strategizing, and attention to detail, and requires simultaneous analysis of both cognitive and emotional aspects. This ability also has an impact on how our memory systems work. And indeed, musicians exhibit enhanced memory functions, creating, storing, and retrieving memories more quickly and efficiently. Studies have found that musicians appear to use their highly connected brains to give each memory multiple tags, such as a conceptual tag, an emotional tag, an audio tag, and a contextual tag, like a good internet search engine. So how do we know that all these benefits are unique to music, as opposed to, say, sports or painting? Or could it be that people who go into music were already smarter to begin with? Neuroscientists have explored these issues, but so far they have found that the artistic and aesthetic aspects of learning to play a musical instrument are different from any other activity studied, including other arts. And several randomized studies of participants who showed the same levels of cognitive function and neural processing at the start found that those who were exposed to a period of music learning showed enhancement in multiple brain areas compared to the others. This recent research about the mental benefits of playing music has advanced our understanding of mental function, revealing the inner rhythms and complex interplay that make up the amazing orchestra of our brain.
All right. So Einstein actually did play the violin. Another plug for being a musician. And there's much more to come. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I will be continuing to provide more content and some articles, references.